Greetings. Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Kraft coming to you live, recorded on the internet from Silicon Valley, just down the street from Stanford Medical School. And thanks to Shafi and team for the invitation to be back to BARTS, this time virtually, to talk a bit about the future of health and biomedicine. So let's see if I get my technology to work and we'll get going. So first of all, I think it's a super exciting time in healthcare, and it's a super exciting time to be a medical student because technology is really rewriting and enabling us to rethink and reimagine healthcare across the care continuum. And you're at the sort of beginning of your journey, have a bit of a beginner's mind and a real opportunity to be shaping and creating the future of health and medicine in the United Kingdom and around the world. And luckily, I was actually born in London at Royal Free Hospital. Some of you might have done rotations there. I still have a strong affiliation for Smarties. I've been lucky to visit with Shafi and others, many historical spots from BARTS to London Hospital College, to be on the rooftop of Royal London Hospital. And I think one of the last times I gave a talk, we had everybody do the special BARTS X element. So I know many of you are just watching online. Send in a picture of you doing the X to Shafi. Maybe we can put it together in a fun virtualized group picture. Okay, so let's dive in. So technologies are all, moving around us very, very quickly. Things are accelerating in many realms. This acceleration of technology and the convergence has really brought disruption to many fields, how we get our digital entertainment, how we do our digital banking, many fields have been disrupted at that convergence of AI, big data, blockchain. Of course, all of our worlds have been pretty horribly disrupted for the last 2 years or so, thanks to the COVID pandemic. And the COVID pandemic has opened our eyes to the fact that in many parts of the world, healthcare has not reached the fourth industrial age where many fields have arrived, but healthcare is still stuck in the third or even the second industrial age. And so COVID, in terms of its bright spots, in a sense, has been a bit of a catalyst. Who led the digital transformation of your company or of healthcare? The CEO, the CTO, or sadly, it's COVID-19 that's helped us do things differently, sometimes, mother necessity, and help rethink and reimagine elements across healthcare. So just like Sputnik set off a space age, COVID sparking a bit of a new health age. And I think it's going to make the next decade, and particularly your careers, really, really, hopefully better, both as a clinician, but also much better for our patients and our communities. And take us from sort of where we've been, practicing sick care, and accelerate us to true healthcare. From what we practice today, very episodic, much more continuous, from physical to now blended and virtualized, from one size fits all to one more personalized and precise, from very provider-centric, the doctor knows all, to where the information is coming from the crowd and being collected and delivered in new forms, and where we're augmenting our human condition to make sense of all this new data so it can be applied to each individual or community. And of course, shifting how we pay for things where outcomes are the new incomes. So that's a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about. But as we look into this new age, don't have a failure of imagination. One of my favorite Bill Gates quotes: most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in the next 10 years. And I think the next 10 years will make the last 10 years actually look slow. Okay, so let's look into this future of the next 10 years. Will the future still be big, brick and mortar hospitals? Well, increasingly, as we think about the future of the hospital, I helped lead a session with hospital CEOs from around the world a few years ago. Our takeaway was the future of the hospital was no longer the hospital. We're becoming virtualized in our care. We're going from hospital to home or hospital to homespital. A lot more of your care will be both in person, but also blended and bringing care to remote locations. We're moving from lab to laptop with our research. We're doing research in new collaborative forms. Clinical trials are becoming digitized and virtualized. What we're learning in the setting of the pandemic, for example, the Host Genetics Initiative is letting us learn who's most susceptible to COVID and why. So lots of new ways of doing things in this emerging age. But even though we're in the future, 2022, it still feels sometimes like we're back to the future. I did my residency in both internal medicine and pediatrics at Mass General Hospital, and I was back there a few months ago where I trained. This is picture me 20 years ago. And not that much has changed at Mass General. In the old ward where I was a brand new young doctor, same alarms are beeping, some of the same nurses, some of the same patients. The only difference is the young doctor on call pushes around a cart with a medical record, EMR. We used to handwrite our records. And sadly, especially in the United States, we're still doing a lot of our medical communication with fax machines and patients filling out the same paper form. So even though we're in the future, we're sometimes stuck with some of the technologies and rubrics of the past. I even had my own cardiac study done last year out of a Stanford clinic. The only way I could get my results were on a CD-ROM. I don't even own a CD-ROM player anymore. So how do we move past using technologies of the past? We're still using similar public health measures from the pandemic of 1918. How do we get out of our mindsets of waiting in waiting rooms? How do we think differently about the silos of how we organize healthcare, which are often based on body parts, not based on actual physiology? We're now, obviously, as you're learning, in our new genomics and multiomics age. So even though we're in the future, again, I love this text, this tweet. Some people say that AI will replace doctors, but I can't really hear them through the sound of my pager beeping, heavy-handed printing on carbon paper order sheets, and tab F12 or arrow keying. So the user interface for us as clinicians often needs to be brought into the future as well. So let's think about first how we can shift some of our mindsets, because hopefully the future of your practice is less sick care and more true healthcare. First of all, what is sick care? Well, sick care is our kind of current model based on very intermittent data that's very episodic and often challenging to acquire. It usually only happens in the four walls of the clinic or ER or intensive care unit. And that leads to our reactive mindset. We tend to wait for the heart attack or the patient to present with a heart attack, or the stroke, or the patient to present with a late stage cancer. I'm an oncologist, and we see most cancers present not at stage 1, but at stage 3 or stage 4. So the future is to go from intermittent and reactive data to one of continuous information that's proactive, that enables us to bring information anywhere, anytime, that can democratize where healthcare happens and arguably bring us better outcomes with lower costs. So from days to real time. And to move the needle, not just on treating disease, but also thinking about preventing it in new ways and moving to an era of optimized precision wellness, optimizing not just lifespan, but health span. Because many of you will live to 100 plus. No one, I think, wants to be 120 and feel 120. We want, 100 to be the new 60. And so there'll be a whole new field of longevity medicine, and even maybe reversing the aging process. So we have this whole continuum to look at. Innovation, part of the theme of this course, gives us the opportunity to look at health and wellness, better forms of doing diagnostics at stage 0, not stage 3, forms of therapy, whether that's a digital app or a new drug or CRISPR. We can also think about differently about discovery, clinical trials, and also think about how do we democratize and improve health equity around the planet, whether, as Shafi has talked about, the shortage of surgeons, or new approaches to bringing folks mental health or even basic health information across the planet. So the future of medicine, I think, is it's in the zeitgeist, right? I wrote the opening article for National Geographic in 2019. And part of the thematic of that article actually was not about 12 innovations, but more that these innovations are coming together. Many of them are exponential on their path. And then when we take these innovations and put them together, that's where things get interesting. So one lesson I want you to take away from this talk is to think exponentially. We're all familiar with exponential technologies, particularly in Moore's law. Here, actually, I'm holding my antique 10-year-old iPhone 2, right? And it felt amazing 10 years ago. Now it feels slow and clunky compared to my iPhone 13 over there. And Moore's law, faster computing getting cheaper and cheaper, is making things become digitized. It's often, though, hard to appreciate the pace of exponential. So one little exercise is to think about going 30 linear steps across your house or apartment. 30 steps, you'll be about 30 meters. But if you take 30 exponential steps, doubling 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, a lot of you are very good at math. By 15 steps, doubling each time, you're at 32,000. But by the 30th step, boom, you're at over 1 billion meters. That would be 26 times around the planet. So you need to think how quickly sometimes exponentials can occur. And so that's enabled this incredible digitization. The technologies that at least Shafi and I grew up with are now appified. We've been through this era of digitization where anybody on the planet with an internet connection or a smartphone could have all the world's information almost. And so this world of digitization means that we can be disruptive. Means things become dematerialized. You don't need to buy a video camera or a GPS unit. They're all appified. They can be almost free, and then they can be democratized because they can be distributed at the press of an app store release button. So this gives us this new lens to reimagine health and biomedicine today in 2022, and what's going to happen over the next 5, 10, and 20 years. So let's take a look at where we are and where things are going. Clearly, we're now in the era of our mobile smart devices, our consumer devices becoming medicalized. The smartphone is having more and more features that give it FDA-approved diagnostic capabilities. For example, this out of University of Washington, you can adjust the microphone and the speaker to look in a kid's ear and determine whether they might have an effusion or an ear infection. Is that pediatrician, however, going to get paid for doing remote visits through the parent? So what used to fit on a desktop in 2000 now fits on my smartwatch, which is now FDA cleared to diagnose or at least screen for atrial fibrillation and maybe even COVID or other conditions. So exponentially, technologies are shrinking and getting faster, smaller, and cheaper. And they're part of this Internet of not things, but Internet of medical things. Riding 5G today, but soon 6G, which will be 1,000 times faster than 4G. And now these Internet of medical type things bring us all sorts of new forms of data, often data that's still siloed and doesn't talk to each other, whether it's your EMR, your genetic sequencing, or payment data, or radiology. So we need to start connecting the dots because we might be missing new knowledge that's being gleaned potentially from these new information sources. And of course, we don't just want data. We want the actionable insights. We want to go from data to knowledge and then narrow the gap between taking that actual insight and bringing that to the bedside or the website. And it still often takes too long, 10, 15, 20 years from something published becoming standard of care. And that's too slow in this exponential age. We also have the challenge with bad data or bad information being communicated. We're seeing the huge public health challenge, particularly in the United States, with the anti-vaxxers and often red versus blue communities. You can see the difference in this slide in the folks who are often, let's say, on the Trump train, who are refusing to get vaccinated, and the extreme difference in mortality and morbidity that they're suffering through this infodemic. Now, technology, of course, is part of the solution, but it's not alone. We need to understand the incentives, how we pay for things, right? We often spend most of our healthcare dollar, whether it's in the NHS or down the street in San Francisco, on end-of-life care or folks who already have acute and chronic disease. What if we spent more of our time and focus on the left side of the equation, prevention, proactive care? And that's starting to happen, partly because we're starting to treat disease earlier. We're screening for it in new ways. We're bringing care from hospital to home to phone to on and even inside our bodies. It's moving to our corner pharmacies, Walgreens, Minute Clinics, Boots are becoming healthcare centers. And of course, we're in this virtual age where a lot of our care is starting to happen in the world of our mobile apps and screens. And in the United States, Walmart, CVS, Minute Clinic, all building new forms and places where we're going to get care outside of the traditional four walls of the clinic or hospital. So a lot of this care anywhere, virtual, connected, mobile, is part of this new era of digital health. I think we'll just soon call it health. I like to think of digital health as the ability to take these new information sources, data, and turn them to actionable information and tools for the individual or the clinician or the hospital or the community or public health worker. So it's a pretty broad definition, but it doesn't mean we're just digitizing the fax machine. And of course, this comes with a lot of apps. I gave a TED Talk 2011, Medicine's Future, there's an app for that. In 2011, there were about 35,000 apps. In 2021, 10 years later, there were over 350,000 sort of digital health apps. A lot of them were, exercise and fitness and diet, but more and more of them are becoming, very disease focused and ones that we're using as clinicians on a daily basis. And digital health is not a panacea. You just can't prescribe someone a Fitbit and expect them to lose weight. We need to study how these things can get integrated into our care and into our medical education. So as you're thinking about all these technologies, and of course, digital is sort of a core component, think about all the exponential technologies that are converging: AI, big data, 3D printing, nanotechnology, CRISPR, blockchain, and they're super converging to the point where we're creating entire new fields that didn't exist when I was a Stanford medical student 20-something years ago. What fields might exist 20 years from now that won't exist in 2021 through this convergence of health and tech and technology and an unmet need? You'll be, I think, thinking of new solutions. One homework for you all as you're going through your clinical training is to keep a little notebook, and when you see things, ask why they're done. You can see lots of unmet needs when you have beginner's mind, and then you can apply some of these new technology tool sets that are here and coming to help solve those pain points going forward as entrepreneurs or just as clinicians or in partnership with innovators going forward. So using these new tool sets, we can address grand challenges across healthcare, from rising costs, an aging demographic in most of Europe and the US, access to care, whether it's Obamacare or Trump care or Biden care. There's still a shortage of doctors, nurses, and specialists in many parts of the world, exacerbated by the burnout and folks leaving the profession during the pandemic. We have the challenge of inefficient uses of information, repeating tests, faxing things, duplication. but also the challenges of our regulatory bodies, whether it's the FDA, the EMA, and also our payers, whether it's the NHS or CMS or Blue Cross Blue Shield. The payers have the hammer on what innovations and technologies get paid for and rise up and are applied. Through the pandemic, it's been an opportunity to collaborate and do things differently. I've been chairing the XPRIZE Pandemic Alliance task force, and we built an alliance from 100 plus organizations from around the world, including many British clinicians and others, to look at new approaches to triage, to testing, to therapy, to communication. And I hope some of these innovations will, of course, cross over into the post-pandemic world. One of the things that we've learned through the pandemic especially is that, often our zip code trumps our genetic code, certainly in lifespan expectancy, and sadly, in terms of who has mortality and morbidity in the setting of the pandemic. African Americans, for example, Hispanics in the United States, much higher overall risk over the course of the pandemic to date. So social determinants and opportunities for health and medicine education really matter. So you can think about the core needs, access to clean water, food, education, vaccines. Those are often part of our social determinants. We also can start to think of our digital determinants. Do your patients have access to a digital device and a memory plan and Wi-Fi or high-speed internet or better battery life? In many parts of the world, we still don't have access to basic internet or even broadband. 50% of the world's population still is not online. The next decade, we'll see almost 100% coming online with platforms like Starlink and others. So we're in this age of reimagination. Just like Uber reimagined driving, they didn't invent any of those technologies. They connected the dots to, press a button and get a taxi or limo. That was quite disruptive. There were strikes in London from the taxi drivers. But this reimagination, again, comes at the interface of technologies. And even Uber and Lyft now have platforms where you can press a button and helps bring a nurse to you to give a vaccine, or patients who can't drive to get to the clinic or to the pharmacy. And we are now getting used to these better platforms, this appification. You press a button and get a doctor or nurse to come to you, or ZipDrug. It might be delivery of your drugs. And now Amazon and Google and Facebook and Microsoft and others are getting into healthcare using their consumer mindset. Amazon Care is rolling into 50 US states in 2022, and they are very good at consumerization. It'll be a blend between virtual and physical. They can bring something to your home with Amazon Prime, and it might be a diagnostic device or test or a clinician. And of course, this has been quite disruptive to old models. They're getting into the pharmacy space. I used to joke that, we might have our drugs delivered by Amazon drones, but just last year, the first FAA-approved drones for delivering drugs, medications, tests were approved. They've already been present in Africa and Europe. So the future is coming faster than we think. And that future can be scary to old players. Pharma, one-size-fits-all drugs will be less common. The blockbuster statins. Pharmageddon, if pharma doesn't adapt, medical device companies don't adapt. This, adaption issue is a problem. Many big companies that at least I grew up with have gone bust. Blockbuster, RIM, BlackBerry, Kodak. Kodak actually invented digital photography, but didn't want to cut into their film sales. And what happened? They went bust in 2013. They went bankrupt. And 12 kids down the street from me in Palo Alto sold Instagram for $1 billion, which is pretty cheap these days in the startup world. So you want to be the disruptor, not the disruptee. And as you go forward in your medical careers, you want to be Ubering yourself before you get Kodak, and bring that mindset and culture and thinking as you go forward across your careers, and bring that even to the older folks who may be more stuck in their old ways. I've been lucky to share Medicine for Singularity University for the last 12 years, to have run a program called Exponential Medicine, where we've had Chafi and many of the folks you'll hear from in the series come. Part of the theme is bringing people together from all sorts of different worlds to innovate. We'll be rebranding and rebooting Exponential Medicine to a new theme, and same theme, but different conference and platform in 2022. So watch that space. But it's been a great opportunity in the past to bring, the regulators like Bakul Patel, who heads up digital health for the FDA, to think differently and help lead this new office for digital health and innovation, so the regulatory bodies can keep up. So it takes all players, patients, providers, investors, technologists, nurses, community, as we rethink and reimagine healthcare collaboratively. Okay, let's go into 3 key areas and how they might take us today into the future and how you might play a role in that. Let's start with health and prevention. Most of our diseases aren't really driven by our genetics, though those play some role. They're more driven from our behaviors, particularly our bad behaviors. poor diet, not enough sleep, that happens in medical school, too much stress, that happens in medical school, too much alcohol, that can happen in medical school. So, or to our patients, and those drive most of our chronic conditions. So if we can start to measure and optimize and maybe better our behaviors, that can make a big difference. And it's only been, what, 13 years, 12, 13 years since the first sort of wearables launched, consumer ones like the Fitbit, to start to measure some of our behaviors. And now in 2022, I'm sure many of you are wearing a wearable. I've got 4 different versions on. I've got my Whoop and my Aura Band and my Apple Watch and my underwearable and a patch. We're becoming explosive. And they're moving from consumer to medical, because these sort of wearables and otherables can measure almost every element of our physiology and our behavior. And that gives us an opportunity to do things in new ways, not just sensors on our wrist, but sensors 3.0 that can be embedded in your smart pill and tell whether the patient had adherence. We're seeing emergence of new forms of patches, like this one called biointelligence. Basically can do 16 plus elements of health data and stream that sort of biomedical information as a service, particularly for outpatient related care. And here's some of my data when I used it for a few days. Lots of power information. We can take small data. You send a patient home from a total hip replacement. Are they walking more and doing better? Or are they walking less and not so well? If they're not walking as much as expected, maybe you can call them proactively before they have a fall. And so where we're heading with this is many of us are data geeks, quantified selfers. We're moving from quantified self to quantified health, where increasingly this data is going to flow from your patients to you, right? And you're going to use that data for prevention and wellness, to diagnostics to therapy. And here's a few examples of what we have, of course, digitized. We can go from our analog scale to a digital one. Next version scales won't just do our weight, but they do our shape and measure our muscle mass and fat mass, and maybe even do a skin exam while you're at it, right? Whether we want to see that data or not. And again, these sort of digital fingerprints will enable us to measure and optimize and give us biomarkers for optimization, for diagnostics, or feedback loop-based therapy. Instead of having to wait for someone to come back in and bring their data or measure the data, it's going to be much more continuous. And we can start to do very important measures now with these devices. There's blood pressure that's been baked into this watch band, but soon we're going to have seamless 24/7 blood pressure coming from radar-based elements or others. This is one called BioBeat. It was just FDA cleared a year or so ago. That's going to come out in patch form and on wristbands that can do 24/7 continuous non-cuff-based blood pressure. That's going to give us lots of possibilities. We're going from wearables to insidables, sensors inside our contact lenses or chips underneath our skin. This one's already on the market to measure blood oxygenation. But you can imagine these sort of sensors, particularly if our chronic disease patients, streaming lots of data 24/7. Starts with the military world, but will trickle down to the healthcare one. And then there's shockables, which can help change behavior, hearables, which give us not just hearing aids or music, but can track our vitals and give us guidance. Ringables, like this Aura ring I'm wearing. Think about all the exponential technology shrunk into a small ring that can give you pretty valuable information about your sleep, for example. Sleep is something super important we underappreciate. That can be used to help recover or prevent disease. If you guys do nothing else for your healthcare career, for your patients, help them get better sleep. There's the idea now of breathables, devices that you can blow in, and basically are nanonodes. This is Alstone out of the UK that can pick up signs of early cancer. The idea of an electronic nose, that's going to be another way of measuring things. Sweatables, if you're an athlete or you have a patient with heart failure or renal disease, can help measure sweat and give you guidance. Ingestibles that you may be swallowing to look at the health of the GI system or even do in vivo interventions. Sockables, sensors being built into our clothes can give us insights for a diabetic patient who can't feel their feet. This one called Siren Socks can find hot spots before a patient gets into trouble and might need an amputation. Wearables for pain. Wearables or connections for your smartphone that can look at your brain health by looking at your eye tracking, for example. And even the idea of feedback loop devices, electroceuticals. This is a woman with a central tremor. She puts on this device that came initially out of Stanford Biodesign. It measures the tremor and interacts with her nervous system to give an electrical pulse that basically obviates out her tremor. So new forms of wearables that also are therapeutic. My favorite in terms of the Internet of Things are underwearables. These little health tags are so cheap, and they're now being reimbursed as remote patient monitoring devices. You put them in your underwear, 10 pairs of underwear, put 10 tags in each one. And now you can see a patient, how they're doing, if they have COPD or pneumonia or COVID from home, and maybe intervene early if they have a challenge. Other ultimate wearables are letting paraplegics walk. Our newer, smaller forms of wearable robotics will help someone who might have a stroke or muscle weakness get around. The ultimate wearable, I'm a pilot, I'd like wearables that let you fly, are jet suits. Another British citizen invented this, and now they're piloting this to look at ways of rescuing folks in the mountains. I got a chance to fly this myself. It was a little harder than it looked, but a lot of fun once you get the hang of it. I was tethered, don't worry, okay. Other things we can measure, food is medicine. The Hippocrates quote, let food be thy medicine, medicine by thy food. You can measure the input, calories, gluten, scan your meals. You can also start to measure output, and smart toilets are coming to give us ins and outs at home and measure other elements of our patient's physiology. And of course, now in the era of the metabolome, some of you tried continuous glucose monitor patches, which are not just for diabetics anymore, and give us a picture of our metabolomics. And so we're going to take all this, our microbiome, our genome, our metabolome, is give us, this era of new precision nutrition to optimize wellness, but also manage disease in a less fad-based, one-size-fits-all manner. Now, in terms of measuring things, we don't need to wear anything now. There's also invisibles. Our cameras now can pick up our vital signs, heart rate, blood pressure, breath, and more. And these will be part of your continuous monitoring of yourselves and of your patients. Voice is a biomarker. Your voice can pick up signs of mental health issues, neurologic issues. It can even predict mortality, lung infections, the sound of someone with CHF, or the sound of a cough. Is it coronavirus or a common cold or croup can be diagnosed with cougholytics. Wi-Fi has been modified by MIT engineers to pick up the vital signs of 10 or more people in the same room at the same time. So we're entering an era where our digital exhaust can be collected, and whether we like it or not, it can be a big brother, can give us certain insights and access. Who owns that data? I argue it should be the patient. Who controls it? It should be the patient and their healthcare providers. And it's not, of course, data. We as clinicians don't want more data. We want the actionable insights. So think about how this integrates into our workflow so that it's reimbursed, that wearable device. It's actionable and it's aligned with the incentives for the patient, the clinician, and the healthcare systems. So that means smarter design. We don't want more electronic medical records and to be data entry clerks, right? That leads to burnout. We need to think about that fourth aim, not just better outcomes, lower cost, improved patient experience, but improved clinician experience. And you as clinicians need to be helping guide those building the next generation EMRs, get in the trenches with them and help be the design thinkers along that journey. It's starting to get easier to integrate those data flows into the health workflow. Apple Health and Common Health on Android are enabling us to now, take our data and through our mobile consumer apps, share that now with iOS 13 or 15 with our friends and family or our clinicians. Now, I can connect my Fitbit data to my Stanford doctor. He wrote me back saying, I've got your steps, heart rate, and weight data. It looks good, but does he really know what to do with my Fitbit data? How do we put that in context, whether I'm healthy or I have disease? So platforms like Verily is doing the baseline trial, 10,000 or more volunteers sharing their medical records, their genomics, their digital exhaust. We have projects like the National Institutes of Health All of Us trial, 1 million Americans sharing their medical records, their genomes, their digital exhaust from wearables. That's going to give us much more than just a Framingham for a small population of Caucasian European-based folks in Western Massachusetts. It's going to be much more equitable and data sets from a more representative populations. And that will give us what I like to call predictalytics. Imagine a bit of a analytic integrated score for your patients, not just their vitals and their labs, but their financial health, their social network strength, their sexual health, integrated into an overall wellness score so you can see problems before they spring up. Imagine each of us and our patients have the equivalent of a check engine light for the body, just like a modern car has hundreds of sensors, but it integrates that with software to show you a problem before you blow a gasket and can go to the mechanic. Similarly for healthcare. So the devices will become commoditized. It's going to be the software layers and the insights and the AI and big data and machine learning on top that's going to create the real value. And this idea of a check engine light for the body is becoming reality. This is a Stanford colleague of mine, Mike Snyder, is the most quantified guy on the planet. He diagnosed his Lyme disease before he would have based on his data. And even his type 2 diabetes, he got after a viral infection. And just last year, they published that they could use a bunch of different wearables from Fitbits to Apple Watches to tell who had COVID when they were still asymptomatic. So imagine your check engine light gives you, say, hey, you've got the flu. Next time you guys get a booster, if you're wearing an Apple Watch, or you might unfortunately get another viral infection, take a look at your wearable data and watch what happens. That will be part of our continuous care. Okay, we've talked a lot of data coming at you. How do we make sense of that? How do we make it change behavior? Because you know you're supposed to exercise more and eat less potentially, but that doesn't mean we're changing behavior. Sometimes it needs incentives or tracking, like some modern cars and insurance companies will give you a better driving insurance premium if you're having healthier driving behaviors. That's going to come to healthcare as well. It's also going to be blended with coaches, sometimes human coaches, sometimes AI avatar versions that can be much smarter and more reactive to your personality type. There's platforms like Livongo that can help coach and optimize diabetic patients. And all this coaching and interface means that the patient is much more engaged, the human, the consumer. The engaged individual is the new drug. Patients included, which is a term coined by my friend Lucian Engelert, is an important way to think about this collaborative future of health and medicine. And that means, again, it needs smart design thinking. It's not one size fits all. The baby boomer wants the hand on the shoulder, wants the in-person visit. The millennial wants to just Snapchat and text their doctor, pediatrician, or pharmacist. So, you can't design the same UI, whether it's for a digital app or other care for different populations. Think about age, culture, language, and incentives. Now, some of these coaches are starting to feel very, very real. We're in the world of avatars and chatbots. We know where they're not real, but they often feel real, and that can help folks engage with their health across different parameters. Voice coaching can come. Voice is a great platform for mediating health information, whether it's in the clinic or the home or the intensive care unit. And it's coming to help us chart our medical records. Voice NLP, natural language processing, is getting quite incredible. And it's going to help us build our charts and tracking. And of course, there's now hundreds of apps that are coming to our home smart devices. Alexa, help, I've fallen, I can't get up, will be part of helping folks who might be living alone activate safely. Imagine our coach.
I don't have an answer for that.
My local device just talked to me, saying it didn't have an answer, it was listening. Imagine your coach in the future gives you feedback in the mirror in the morning, giving you a score based on how you respond to that information. It doesn't just show you of today, it might show you of tomorrow. If you went from 255 pounds and lost 90 pounds, or let you show your patients what's going to happen to their overall health span. If you have a patient who smokes, you can show them before smoking and after smoking. That can be a powerful lever for change. Or if you spend too much time on social media, what might happen? And that brings us to one of my favorite synthesis areas of healthcare: augmented, virtual, and extended reality. I know you had a great talk from Dr. Shafi Ahmad about the metaverse and VR and AR and beyond. That, and I think my old Google Glass is antique now, but these technologies are going to start dissolving into our contact lenses. They're obviously starting to provide very actionable information in the clinical space. It's going to start guiding procedures, let you see through the patient and augment procedures as you go ahead. It's going to help you educate your patients where they can see through their bodies, their own physiology and disease. That can help them stay on top of their medications. For those of you on the pediatric realm, you can educate your patients when they're younger to understand their basic physiology and anatomy. That can impact them and their health, and those are the families for the rest of their lives when they understand that. Here's my son Leo, and he's 3, wearing his augmented reality t-shirt and getting a better handle on how his body works, all right? Very powerful new forms. And then, of course, there's virtual reality. It's always fun to put grandma on a roller coaster, but as you've already discussed, VR can be a form of therapy to treat burn patients, for example. They go into a cold environment and they throw snowballs and use less than half the opiates. It's being blended with mental health. It's being integrated with physical therapy to make it much more engaging and quantifiable, so the physical therapist can be virtualized. It's being brought into the clinic space. So you might be have a scared patient who's in a bone marrow transplant unit or about to go to surgery. They can be at the beach. And of course, as Shafi and colleagues have pioneered, it can play a huge role in medical education, right? A Stanford project on virtual heart. I mean, I can never remember tetralogy of Fallot, but if you can walk inside a tetralogy of Fallot heart and understand its valves and malformations and even do the procedure and change it, that's going to really stick in much better ways. Or let the patient see that as well. And of course, the future medical education, as Shafi and others have pioneered, is enabling ways to share medical training. I was with Shafi in the operating room, I think it was almost 6 years ago, when they did the first live stream surgery to thousands of patients around the world. So really exciting times to help democratize surgical and other education. And then Proximie, started by Nadine Harakaram, another NHS surgeon, is growing gangbusters as well. We do virtual mentoring and coaching someone using VR, AR, or even just an iPad. So lots of new ways to improve education. Video games for doctors.
Capture the challenges of medical
to try procedures that might be rare, all the way to common procedures. Instead of see one, do one, teach one, as many of us in the old days trained, it's going to be see one, simulate, 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 not just alone in the operating room, but collaboratively as you go forward, and bringing in virtual help when you need it. So this will bring us to an age, I think, of a ways for the clinician, crowdsourcing information from thousands of procedures, making the average surgeon, and remember, 50% of doctors are below average, none of you, of course, up level everybody. So when you're doing a procedure, you're going to be getting guidance from sensors, and it's going to know where you are in the procedure and help you sometimes step by step and make a 10th percentile surgeon a 99th percentile. And we're going to go in your medical careers from sort of driver assist and to surgeon assist going forward. All right, what about diagnostics? And I'm sorry I'm going long here. Lots happening in the diagnostic space, right? We now have the ability to pick up some diseases, let's say Alzheimer's, who's at risk sometimes 10 or 20 years earlier based on blood scans, eye tracking, or genetics. We're going to start to hopefully treat some of those folks who are at risk early at stage 0. You can, of course, have your brain imaged. Here's my brain imaged, comes with color coding. And that kind of imaging, a full body MRI that I had done for about 2,000 pounds about a year or so ago, gives lots of screening information. It's going to be read by the AI. And these scanners are getting cheaper and will become showing up at your corner pharmacy, where you'll be able to get a 10-minute scan done every year for maybe 100 pounds or less. And will be covered by NHS or covered by Kaiser. And the scanners themselves are getting smaller, more mobile. This is the Hyperfine device. It's mobile. It plugs into the wall power. I was on a boat cruise on the Hudson with the inventor of this device. I had my brain MRI done in 5 minutes, plugged into wall power. Not a 5 Tesla MRI, but enough to give you some interesting, useful information, at least prove I have a brain at the moment. Okay, so summary of this component. Lots of new technologies are already here. They're starting to be glommed together in new ways, bringing us this Internet of Medical Things, this idea of quantified health. We're starting to connect the dots with these to bring us health as a service, predictalytics, and then it's going to move into this future, which can be sort of a health layer all around us moving forward. And part of that, again, is this ability to do diagnostics. This is the idea of the digital doctor's bag. This is some of the pictures of the technologies I have on my desk. These can be used by you and your patients to do proactive early diagnostics and monitoring and modification of disease. So for example, TytoCare, you can buy these in a corner electronics store here in the US, can augment virtual visits. We're now seeing, the digitization of the stethoscope that comes with the EKG and can listen to heart sounds and diagnose them much better than me, and probably better than some highly trained cardiologists. We, of course, now have the Butterfly AI-powered ultrasound. Many of you won't wear a stethoscope soon. You wear your portable ultrasound, which can do a fast exam. It gives you the ability to democratize and do diagnostics anywhere, almost any time at low cost. We can do diagnostics with a variety of different patches that can stream vital signs 24/7 anywhere you're connected to the internet. And that enables you to discharge a patient or put them on a step-down unit or a lower monitored bed in the inpatient setting. And going beyond, of course, vitals for diagnostics is the world of the laboratory on the chip. More and more can be shrunk to a chip in modular fashion. I think we'll have a whole set of these that will bring what required a central lab to anyone's smartphone into their home. Of course, a critical element, of course, in the setting of the pandemic is testing. It's been very hard to get fast, frequent, cheap, and easy COVID testing. We're seeing the challenges of not having enough tests in many frames and stages of our pandemic. We actually ran a $6 million rapid COVID testing X Prize, and 700 teams from 77 countries enter. 9 amazing winners, some using smell and low-cost cards, others developing new biophotonic methods, others using breath and other smart ways to not just maybe diagnose COVID, but other infectious diseases and the non-infectious diseases going forward. One of my favorite new ways of doing diagnostics is the idea of a smartphone selfie, taking a picture of someone's face and making a diagnosis, or using the camera on the smartphone to replace urinalysis. I'm on the board of this Israeli company called Healthy.io. You simply don't need to bring your urine anywhere. You just dip it in the privacy of your home, take a picture with your smartphone camera, and it does the urinalysis and can screen for UTI or early kidney disease and send that to your doctor or your nephrologist. So that's a big mover. And that can, as being working with NHS, they've been screening folks now who have diabetes and hypertension to find folks who have early risk of kidney disease to intervene before they might lead to renal failure, transplant, or dialysis. Another part of this future medicine that you'll be dealing with much more than we have to date is our personal genomic information. It's been very consumer to date, but now you can get a full human genome done for under $1,000 US. The price of sequencing has dropped at twice the rate of Moore's law. And soon you'll have it, in every medical record. And that's going to give you this low-hanging fruit. Pharmacogenomics, picking the right statin can be based on your genes, let alone other medications. We're going to understand diseases at their genomic level. It's not just type 2 diabetes. There's at least 3 distinct subtypes that we can distinguish based on patients' genomics. And then there'll be this era of polygenic risk scores. You're going to know early in someone's life, even sequenced at birth, before birth, their risk of heart disease, AFib, bowel disease, breast cancer. And then you can modify their prevention and wellness regimen based on their genetic and other risks. And then there's other omes, of course, the proteome, the exposome, the sociome, the microbiome, which is super interesting. The bugs that live on our gut and in our mouths and our skin play a huge role in risk for inflammatory bowel disease, or risk for neurologic disorders, obesity, et cetera. And I think part of our future will be understanding this microbiome and even replacing that, as we're starting to do in treating C. difficile, but maybe rebooting the microbiome of someone with inflammatory bowel disease. Okay. What do we do with all this new data? How do we connect the dots? That's a huge challenge. How do we make sense of all this new data and even information? We need help. Our brains haven't had upgrades, but now all this new information exists. How do we make sense of it? And of course, AI and machine learning is playing a key role. Not just AI, I think IA, intelligence augmentation. It's already playing a role in dermatology, and the NHS is leveraging that as well to do screenings when you don't have an easily available dermatologist. It's playing a role, of course, in the future of radiology. You can do a better job in many cases than highly trained radiologists. It's coming into digital pathology, where you can take a H&E stained picture and determine, is it a cancer? What type of cancer? Genetic malformations might the tumor have without even having to do sequencing. That's going to get super interesting. And even for the proceduralist, colonoscopy can be augmented with AI to find a lesion that might have been missed or help indicate what needs to be biopsied that might have not been done otherwise. And of course, DeepMind out of UK originally is doing some incredible work to look at the retina. And that, again, can give us early warning for a whole swath of diseases, from diabetes to hypertension to heart disease. And so it gets pretty interesting using AI. Even the EKG on your wrist can start to look at peak T waves very early and determine someone's potassium level using AI machine learning. And this is all going to start to come to our homes, to our intensive care units, to give that sort of early warning before someone has full-on sepsis or a fall or a line infection. Well, I think where this is getting summarized is this idea of a digital twin. We'll be able to integrate this information and use it to be modeling what's going to be optimal for our patients or our communities. And so if you think about all these new data layers, from sociome to environmentome to gut microbiome to family history, we'll start to synthesize that to give us much more highly tuned guidance that we can use in partnership with our patients going forward, much more real time. And of course, none of this is going to replace the doctor or the nurse. It's not a competition, it's more cooperation. So AI is not going to replace the doctor, but the doctors and other clinicians using AI will replace those who don't. Let me finish up real quick with therapy. So much happening in the therapy space, from CRISPR, which is going to cure soon, starting to sickle cell, thalassemia. We're seeing, of course, mRNA, not just for vaccines for COVID, but soon vaccines for Alzheimer's and cancers. We're seeing new ways of delivering drugs and devices and genes, drug delivery elements that improve adherence, simple apps, smart pill bottles, even pills that can deliver biologics that usually need to require an infusion or IV, can be swallowed and can inject the biologic into the gut wall. So lots of new ways that we can deliver our care. And of course, new delivery models of care are virtualized. This era of telemedicine is not new. We've been using telephones for a long time, but now we're blending those models. So as you're going to be practicing more, do you need to be educated not just as a hand on the shoulder, in the clinic, but be trained as a virtualist as part of your care procedure? It takes a bit of a different interaction when you're not in the same room. So how do you improve not just your bedside manner, but your website manner? Is that even taught in your medical school? and how do we leverage new forms of prescribing data, information, and tools in that virtual model. And as we enter this metaverse, you'll be visiting patients in clinics, and it'll feel like you're there, but you're not there. You may be an avatar, but it's going to really change the game and how we do things. In many cases, we won't even have the human interaction before your patients have gone through a chatbot, whether it's through Ada or Babylon or SydneyCare or others. Chatbots are going to learn each of us and our patients and give us much higher level, smarter triage before we need to up level to human intervention. Part of interventions are, of course, now becoming digital. We're going to start prescribing apps, digital therapeutics, some of which are FDA cleared, whether it's for smoking cessation or diabetes or digital mental health, which is exploding on the scene, or video games that can treat ADHD better than Ritalin without side effects. And because there's so many apps out there for clinicians and patients, it's a bit overwhelming. So that's a pain point, right? How do we make sense of this world? So I've been building out a new platform. It's at the website digital.health. Easy to remember the website, digital.health. We're launching the new version of that in the first half of 2022. I'll give you a sneak peek. We built a database of many of these new health technologies and solutions, so that we're going to be able, as clinicians, to find what solutions might match our patients. So essentially, here's a little sneak peek. You're looking at digital therapeutics, a LiveCore, the virtual EKG. You can look for KardioMobile. You can learn about the EKG. You can rate it. You can put it in your virtual formulary. You can start to prescribe it to your patients, and hopefully get that data back to you as the clinician and to the patient. Or you might be looking for solutions that relate to diabetes and diet. Find therapeutic interventions like platforms like Virta, which using diet and coaching and apps can help reverse type 2 diabetes. So these are just an example of starting to make sense of this. I'm looking for medical students and others to help us build out that platform. So if you want to have an interest in building out digital.health, please contact me, Daniel@digital.health. Other ways of doing therapy are blending the world of 3D printing, from 3D printing braces and hearing aids and medical implants. Medical devices can be printed on the space station in remote locations. I've been thinking about 3D printing in the form of medication, right? Many patients take a pile of pills, they're often the wrong dose, they have to cut them in half or in thirds. What if we could make it easier and more precise? What if we could use our AI machine learning to pick the right doses and combinations and then deliver those in the right dose, right? Because we're all different to some degree, and not put those in just a pill box, but put those in a personalized polypill. So I've been developing a technology called telemedicine, where you're going to build personalized polypills with your aspirin, statin, beta blocker, synthroid, vitamin B and D. Think about a chronic disease patient. You might need to take multiple medications, some of which might need to be adjusted, like their Lasix or their digoxin or their Coumadin. Imagine these printers at the corner pharmacy or eventually on your kitchen counter that would print and modify the medication, maybe even on a daily or twice a day basis. So watch that space. You can learn more in one of my recent TED Talks on that project. And of course, I like to think about 3D printing in the world of stem cell biology and regenerative medicine. 3D printing organs is sort of on the wish list. That's a bit farther away to meeting the clinic. I think what's really exciting today is with CRISPR type technologies, we can start to knock in human genes into human-sized pigs and start to humanize the pig. And that's particularly critical if we want to do xenotransplantation. It might not be kosher, but given the thousands of patients who die every year waiting for organs, we're going to see the advent of humanized organs transplanted from pigs to save the lives of folks with organ failure. And as of fall of 2021, the first demonstration of that in a human with a pig organ was demonstrated. So watch that space. It's pretty exciting. Other forms of therapy, I mentioned electricity as medicine, pacemakers, not just for the heart, but for treating sleep apnea, pacemakers in your brain to treat mental health conditions. Who owns that data? Who can hack those devices? Lots of conditions that we need to think about there. Of course, blockchain and Bitcoin and tokens and beyond might play a role in making our healthcare data safer as we go forward. Okay, let me conclude with the last quick topic. Discovery, whether it's a new drug or gene therapy or app, discovery is still important in showing that these devices and other solutions and drugs and pills and apps work. So how do we reinvent the clinical trial? It doesn't happen physically. We're now in this era of virtualized trials, something that's been accelerated by the pandemic. And that gives us the opportunity to use some of these new technologies to download an app for most patients and to bring testing and proof of efficacy across the planet at much lower cost and at much higher speeds. And to crowdsource not just clinical trials, but health and biomedical information in general. think about, most of you are too young to remember without driving, without Google Maps or Waze, but there was a time 15 years ago, we all had paper maps. Now you have a map, in this case, a map of Rome being built in a day just by driver data, built by crowdsourced information, private data, speed and location. What if we had a crowdsourced healthcare map? We're all sharing anonymously and de-anonymized, anonymized our health data to build better health maps as we go forward. What if we could think about ourselves and our patients and our healthcare systems and pharma companies, not just as organ donors and blood donors, but as data donors? And if we can integrate that data smartly, we could really build this sort of health ways of the future. In fact, I met an Israeli company that's built that. One of the founders of Waze has built a company called Stuff That Works, Stuffthatworks.health, where you can go in there with your condition and share what's working and hasn't worked for your particular condition. It could be psoriasis, Crohn's disease, migraines, plantar fasciitis, and find what's worked and hasn't worked for patients like you. Very, very powerful platform that I think will be integrated into many elements of health and medicine going forward. Okay, so in closing, the future of health and medicine is bright. It's at this interface of many exponential technologies. So think about how those technologies converge. Don't just think about those technologies today in 2022. Think about where the puck is going to be in 2025, 2030, 2032. And if you take that exponential convergent mindset, we really all have this incredible opportunity to move from reactive sick care to one that's proactive, continuous, preventative, from one size fits all to personalized, from siloed to intelligence and crowdsourced, and from paternalistic to democratized and collaborative. So let's build that together. Let's not take incremental steps, let's take exponential ones. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And it's up to all of us, particularly you, the next generation of health and medicine, not to predict that future of health and medicine, but to build it boldly, collaboratively together to take us where we have the potential to go. So with that, thanks very much. Happy to reach out and be connected in the future. Let's build that future of health and medicine together. Thanks.